I think the biggest misconception about AI is that the robots are taking over and that we've lost all agency and control over what's happening, that there's some kind of technological determination, that there's by sheer force of adoption, we won't be able to, if you will, control our own destiny. I think it's the exact opposite. I think choices that we make as researchers, as industry practitioners, as civil society members, etc., will determine, if you will, the way in which the digital revolution will unfold. And I think the most interesting question in AI ethics at the moment is the question of authority and the relationship between authority and trustworthiness. So discussions about is AI ethics something to be done by jurists, by legislators? Is it by some council of the virtuous that some technology companies have currently employed? Is it by activist communities? So for me, the most important question is almost the constituencies that are involved in this debate, and how do we determine what is authoritative and what isn't in this context? I think that the role of academia with respect to governance and the ethics of AI has been seen to be that they are if you will, a interest group or a constituent of the debate, which occupies a more neutral space. So you'll find that there's a lot of strong views held in the academy, and the views are diverse, of course. And the academy is a conglomerate of different departments, so humanities, social sciences, the arts, and science and engineering. I think the academy should, in a way, get its own house in order, and then they should actually think about ways in which different academic units can meaningfully work with one another. So I think the role of academia is actually to set an example of how to actually, in practical terms, have different communities of scholars or perspectives working together. And in a way, that's not just one of the communities dictating to the other. So I don't think engineers are particularly interested in being getting a finger wagged at them by social scientists who tell them that everything they're doing is evil. And I don't think that the social scientists are too interested in engineers saying, oh, no, you don't understand anything. So honest, good faith engagement by academia to set an example for the wider community. So in discussions about AI ethics, quite rightly, we hear people refer to ethical polarity or differences of perspective, contentions in the value systems that underpin our ethical judgments that ultimately translate into our discussions or our positions on AI ethics. And that's fine, and of course that's important to recognize that diversity. However, there's a danger in pointing out the need to respect diversity in never actually coming to some consensus with respect to how we want our systems to perform. So what I see in the role of assurance and auditing is, if you will, a way in which to make apparent and transparent the decisions that have been made, and, if you will, the kind of ethical targets, the values or the principles or the processes that have been guiding a particular system's development and deployment. So I see assurance as the kind of way in which we can move past subjectivity into a bit more objective or publicly verifiable set of standards or statements. I believe that the single most important problem in implementable AI assurance processes is the shifting positions or the non-committal positions of various regulatory and standards bodies. I think that if we had it doesn't have to be a dogmatic position, but if we have a relatively mature standards target, if you will, then it makes assurance much easier to do and makes it much more stable. So I think I'm going to burden the regulators and the ethicists with this problem of actually giving us targets to assure according to. So my background is in philosophy, and often I think to myself when I read texts from thousands of years ago, whether or not the authors of those texts would, in some way or another, be able to meaningfully engage in discussions and debates that we have today. And I think on some subjects they wouldn't, because there would just be such a radically different context and different set of kind of epistemic truths or assumptions and so on and so forth. But in other, I think perhaps more important ways, I think they would totally get it. I think that we could, I think that reading, let's say, the Rumayana, reading Aristotle, reading the Old Testament, reading the Quran, reading whatever, all these various ancient texts from radically different contexts to ours is still meaningful. So I think there's actually something quite universal about the nature of the human that underpins this. And I think that when some of the hyperbole about if you will, the change in reality brought about by AI is brought up, I think that it's important to take a historical view on these things and to understand that the human will still remain the human. Human beings will still suffer as they have suffered from time immemorial. They'll have the same desires that they've had since time immemorial. They'll have the same fears. They'll have the same concerns about their mortality and so on and so forth. So I think we should have a more realistic understanding of not every single event in history is a unique event and an event that's going to radically change the nature of how we are as humans. I think humans will remain humans.